All right, hi everyone. Today we're going to talk about the concepts of totaling and counting, and then do some practice exercises to demonstrate them. Right here, we've got an example of both totaling and counting. So counting takes place whenever we're working with while loops, which you've seen before. Here we have count equals 0, we have while count is less than 5, and then count equals count plus 1. That means that count is going to be equal to 0 at first, and while the variable count is less than 5, this code is going to keep running. But we're adding 1 to count each time. So this is only going to run 5 times. By that point, count will be equal to 5, and this condition here will be false. So this idea right here of being able to add a value inside a loop, this is considered inside the loop, to a variable that exists outside the loop is counting. And it's also kind of totaling, right? So whenever we run this loop, whenever we run this code, each of the 5 times, these variables are going, all of these values and these variables are going to get recreated each time. However, this is not going to because it's outside the loop. So right here, what we do each time is we take whatever existing value whatever the existing value is of count, we add to 1, and then we store that in count. So for example, if count were to equal 2, we would add 1 to it, and then the count value of count up here would change to 3 for 2 plus 1. So the whole idea behind this is that things are constantly changing in the while loop, and to store data outside the while loop, to store data that we can use once the while loop has finished executing, we need to create variables outside. These are like our safe boxes where we can store data that we've gotten or we've calculated inside the loop right here. So this kind of does the same thing as the count variable. Each time right here, we're getting an input for the price of an apple. So basically, we're running this code 5 times. Each time we're asking for the price of an apple that a person bought. And we're storing it in a variable called price of apples. And then that's getting added to total cost of apples each time. So old value of total cost of apples, price of apples, and then the new value. So for example, the first time, so we're starting out total cost of apples equals 0. The first time, if someone enters $5.99 right here for price of apples in this input, we're going to add $5.99 plus 0, which is the current total cost of apples, and that'll get stored. That'll become total cost of apples. So now total cost of apples will be equal to $5.99. Let's say the second time we're asking for the price of the next apple, and someone enters in $5 right here. The total cost of apples is currently $5.99. So we're going to add 5 plus the old value of total cost of apples, 5 plus $5.99, which equals $10.99. And then the total cost of apples will be equal to $10.99. So that's kind of how it works. Here, we're constantly adding stuff to these variables. Let's take a look at some exercises to illustrate that in a more practical way. So right here, we have Ivan, who would like to calculate the average height of the students in his class. He would like to write a computer program that allows each of the 30 students in the class to enter their height in centimeters and then calculate the average from those values. However, he's not good enough at coding, so you must write the computer program for him. So there's a few things. We want to calculate average height, and we want to get input from the user 30 times for each of 30 students. And we're going to have to use totaling because the average is just the total divided by the total number of things we have. So right here, this is going to be the average of everything each student enters divided by 30 for 30 students. So let's see how we can go ahead and write some code to do that. So first, we want to get input for 30 students. So the first thing we're going to do is create a while loop that executes code 30 times. So while I is less than 30, while count is less than 30. And then as in every while loop, we'll have count equals count plus 1. But we want to get input 30 times. So we want to get the height 30 times from 30 different students. So we'll do height equals int input give me your height. Okay. So what this is going to do so far is it's just going to get the height 30 times. This loop is going to run 30 times, so it's going to repeat this code 30 times. But we also want to calculate, we want to get the total, right? And then divide it by 30. So we want to get all of the heights added up together, and then we're going to divide it by 30 after that. So we need to create a variable called total up here that will store the height each time it's entered and add it to a total, add it to a running total. We're going to do total equals total plus height. This time, every time that someone enters in a value for height, it's going to get added to this total variable up here. All right. And then we're going to print total divided by height. Sorry, total divided by 30. Or we could even do total divided by count, because count is eventually going to get to 30. That's what's going to stop the while loop. So I'm kind of lazy, actually, to do this, to type in like 30 values. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to say 3 values. All right. And then we're going to see if this works, if we can get the average of 3 values. And we might have some errors. If we do, we'll fix them. That was one right there. Okay, let's run this. All right, give me your height. Let's see, let's say 12. That's pretty short, but okay, this time we'll say 150. This time we'll say 250. Right, and we've gotten the average of all of those. Let's just print count and total. Let's run it again, print count and print total, just to show you what those variables would look like after we've done all of this. So let's run that again. Again, we're going to enter 12, we'll enter like 160, and we'll enter 250. Okay, so this was our total right here, 422. It added all of these up. This is our count, so that's how many things we entered. Remember, count was just counting each time until we got to 3. And then this is the average right here. So this is the most basic example of totaling and counting. All right, let's check it. Let's do another exercise. Write a program that allows the user to enter 10 grades corresponding to 10 assignments. You can assume the grades will be between 0 and 100. The user should calculate the average of all grades over 50 and no others. Okay, so we're going to allow the user to enter 10 grades, but we're only going to calculate the average of all grades over 50. So that means that we're going to need an if statement. But that also means that potentially, if we only have 5 grades that are over 50, we're going to add up the scores of those 5 grades and then divide them by 5. So this is a slightly different scenario. Let's go ahead and let's write the code to solve this. I'll kind of walk you through that. So it says here we want to enter 10 grades. So I'm going to kind of get rid of all of this stuff, get down to the bare bones while loop. And because we want to do something 10 times, we're going to change this to 10. All right. And we want to get some input from the user 10 times. And that input was grades. So we're going to say grade equals, it's going to be a float, input, enter grade. Okay. So this is going to allow the user to enter a grade in 10 times. So now that we've done this, what we want to do is we want to calculate the average of all grades over 50 only. So what that means is that to this total, so we're going to add we're going to add whatever values are here into a total. But we only want to get values that are greater than 50. So we're going to have an if statement, if grade is greater than 50, then add it to the total. However, we also need to keep track of how many values are greater than 50 so we can calculate our average. This count right here is just adding 1 each time to keep the while loop going. So this is making sure that we are running this while loop 10 times. But in order to keep track of how many grades were greater than 50, we need to have a second counter. So we'll say counter for valid grades equals 0. And we're going to add to that each time. So every time we have a grade greater than 50, we're going to add that grade to the total, and then we're also going to add that to our counter for valid grades so that we know how many grades were over 50. So we can calculate that average in the end. So counter for valid grades equals counter for valid grades plus 1. All right. So let's go ahead and run that. Let's kind of do it with 5 grades. I'm just feeling kind of lazy. Okay. What I'm going to do is I'm going to print out, well, the count is going to reach 50. Or sorry, it's going to reach 5. But let's print out counter for valid grades. Counter for valid grades. Let's print out the total. And then let's print out our average, which will just be total slash, I'm just going to put this on a new line. Nah, let's not do that. Total slash counter for valid grades. So yeah, we changed this to 5 because I'm kind of lazy. So let's go ahead and run this. We might have some errors. If we do, we'll fix them. Enter grade. Okay, so we're going to enter, the first grade we're going to enter is 21. Then we'll enter 75. Then we'll enter 61. Then we'll enter 13. And then we're going to enter 45. So because we only have 3 grades, well, let's make that 55. Because we only have 3 grades now that are over 50, our counter for valid grades should be 3. And our total should only be the total of these 3 grades based on this if statement. So our total should be something like 136, 191, if my math's right. And our counter should be, for valid grade, should be 3. So let's hit enter. And we've got 3 for our counter for valid grades. And we've got a total of 191 right here. And then this is our average for those 3. 191 divided by 3, that makes sense. Cool, okay. Next exercise. This one's a little different from the others because we're still doing totaling, but we're not really getting any user input. We just want to add up every odd number up to 300. And some examples of odd numbers are like 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, 11. This is more of an arithmetic problem. So the thing is right here, we have up to 100, up to 300. So basically you want to go through every number up to 300 or every odd number up to 300. And that's the highest we want to go. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a while loop. Counter is greater than or equal, less than or equal to 300. And then we'll do the classic while loop. Counter equals 0. And counter equals counter plus 1. So if we just print out counter, it's just going to take us up to 300, one by one. Let's go ahead and run that. All right, so one by one, we've gone up to 300. But we want to get every odd number. So the first odd number isn't 0, but it's 1. So we're going to start at 1, and then the next odd number is not 2, but it's 3. And then after that's 5, and then after that's 7, and then 9. So instead of adding to 1 each time, we're going to add 2. We're going to start at 1, and then add 2 right here. Okay? So let's go ahead and run that and see what happens. Let's clear this up. Run this. All right. We're pretty much getting every odd number right here up until 300. 300 is an even number, so we're not going to see it. And now we just want to add these together. So we're going to create a variable called total up here. It's pretty much, I mean, how it's always going to work. We're creating a variable, and then we're going to do this. We're adding the counter each time to the total, because we want to find the total of every odd number from 0 to 300. So effectively, we want to add up every single one of these numbers. So each time when we get counter, because this right here, this is the variable counter just being printed out like a bunch of times, 150 times. So every time we run this loop, we want to add our counter value to total. This counter. And once we've done that, we want to print our total. Okay, cool. So the first time counter equals 1, so we're just going to add 0 plus 1, and that's going to give us 1. Then we're going to add 2 to the counter. Go back around, check is that, well, we're going to add 2 to the counter, which is going to give us 3. Go back around, does it still meet the condition? Yes. So total equals 1 plus 3, so that's going to give us 4, and so on. So let's go ahead and run this. Yeah, let's clear that up. And our total is 22,500. This is a really simple use of totaling. And we made some changes to our counter so that we could get every odd number and add it up into the total right here. You might see some problems like this that don't require user input. It's just doing some kind of arithmetic calculation, so it's good to see it in this context as well. I hope this video was useful. If you have any questions about the code, you could just write a question in the comments and I'll get to it as soon as possible. Have a nice day.